Welcome to All Basket Games. I'm Gerolf, this is Vajandil, and today we want to talk to you about quest markers. What is a quest marker?
It's a mark on your map that shows where your quest is when you play a game.
I guess that's a pretty good definition. So, it can also be like an arrow that's pointing towards the quest, or like you remember from Skyrim. I think is it at the top or at the bottom you have like a
Yeah.
compass?
At the top, it's
Yeah, at the top.
there.
So there's like a compass, and that compass sort of, if you're looking at the right direction, then it shows this little marker that you need to go to this direction.
Yeah, and one very classical form of quest marker is in Crazy Taxi, the very
yeah.
famous arrow that was patented by Sega
Yeah.
for a very very long time. I think it might have ended already or something, but still the arrow it's a form of quest marker. It shows where you have to go or
Yeah.
need to go.
Yeah. And like, of course, the biggest problem I have with those quest markers. Oh, by the way, not to confuse. If you Google quest marker, you get sort of two different types of results. The first one is the, like as I mentioned, the Skyrim arrow that points where you need to go, and the other one is what you see in World of Warcraft and many other MMOs these days. Like you have a NPC and there's like this exclamation mark on top of the NPC. So it's a quest marker in the sense that it marks an NPC who has a quest for you. So I'm fine with those, but I'm not fine with the quest markers that we mentioned that, show you exactly where to go. Like, my biggest problem exactly there is that, when you have a quest marker like that, you're not looking at the world around you. You're just looking at the quest marker, or you're mostly looking at the quest marker, which is really sad because especially these kind of quest markers are most used in games like Skyrim and Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption, I think, and Kingdom Come Deliverance. Games like that, where they're open world games, and the developers have put a lot of effort into making the world beautiful and rich and everything.
Lifelike.
Yeah, and in the end, you're not looking at any of that. You're just looking at the quest marker. You're opening the map and seeing, where you need to go exactly, and that's all that you're looking at the game. That really bothers me because it feels like Band-Aid. Because most players would say, think about Skyrim. I think there was even an article that, that asked the question, is Skyrim unplayable if you disable the quest markers? And if it is, then clearly the developers have failed at something. Because to me, the quest markers they're just Band-Aid. In that, you'd like to think, but if I don't have quest markers, then how do I know where to go? How do I know who to talk to?
Yeah, I have a point to make to that because I played Skyrim as well, and I strayed away of any quest markers. I always turned all the quests off at all times, but there was a problem because, well, yeah, when you get a quest, it usually opens up a marker in the map. It opens up the place where you need to go. Usually it's a cave or place in a city. But if it's a cave, I remember it might appear there, and if you remember your maps before that, you can check the map and see, that opened up. That means that's where the quest wants me to go. That's separate from the quest marker.
Yeah.
That just shows the place. It puts the cave symbol on the map.
Ah, right.
It's the location marker.
Yeah, okay.
So that's one way. You usually get the quest from people. They tell you something. They need something, or there's something you need to do. Other times you open a book and suddenly dudung sound comes, and it means the book itself tells something.
Yeah.
And I really tried hard to not use quest markers, only use the hints that the person or the book gave me, but it was impossible. There's not not impossible, but it requires you to just go around in the world and keep some kind of notebook at hand to write down if location is mentioned, and then start going around, and you just happen to go into a cave and it says it's this cave.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the cave I needed to go to. So it's not really encouraging this. If you don't use the quest markers, you'd have to really just accept that you need to wander around a lot.
Yeah.
Very much. There's no in-world hints or guides to tell you where to go.
Yeah. And
So your term Band-Aid really fits with, at least with Skyrim's
yeah. And because,
situation.
yeah, because if you look at a game like the original World of Warcraft, the vanilla, the classic version, like you didn't need any of that in that game. And I wonder why is that? And it's mostly because the world was built pretty well. So, and of course, like the quest descriptions, they gave you like a general idea of where you should go about. So like you're in a town and you get a bunch of quests, and it can say, it's to the south, so you walk out of the city or town or whatever, and you start going south, and you keep following the road, and you keep wandering about, and you most likely find the place, and when you find, you can see in the map that the name of the place and so on. So in the original World of Warcraft, you didn't need really any of that. So it was definitely done better. But despite that, they added it at some point. So
was it optional in the vanilla version?
no, it just didn't exist.
Okay.
Yeah. Or well, to be truthful, there were like unofficial mods for it.
Oh,
I remember because I did end up using some of them at some point when I had like leveled multiple characters and I just wanted to get things done as fast as possible. But I sort of really regret using those, and especially nowadays, and for like 10 years, over 10 years already, it has been baked into the game that you can just open the map and it shows you exactly where to go. And not just that, because I do really miss like the sense of adventure in the original World of Warcraft, where you would start going into that general direction and the quest tells you to go there, and it tells you maybe to defeat these type of enemies, but then you have another quest there which tells you to retrieve some items, and you don't really know how to do that or how you will end up doing that. So maybe you start defeating enemies and none of those items drop, so now you start looking around, and you notice that there's some like small items all around there in, let's say it's a campsite or something, and they're interactable. So now you start, go near that item and you right click it and your character picks it up, and now you have that item. So that makes you sort of pay attention to all the little details that the developers have put into the world, and I think that's really great. But in like modern World of Warcraft, you don't have to do that. You just go to the site and you see just like millions of things sparkling millions of miles away, and you can immediately tell, okay, those are the things I can interact with. And I guess like from a UI standpoint, yeah, it makes things easier. Like if this was software that you were using for your work, then that would be great. But it's not. It's a game. You're there to experience the adventure. You're there to see all the fancy, nice things. So in that sense, it just takes away from the adventure. You're not looking at all the details in the world. You're just looking at these markers that are shining everywhere, that, you know, come here and click this.
I can really see the problem there as a person who really likes UI designs, and I have somewhat have had some education on creating those. And I can see the debate in the designer's head of making things easy to understand, and especially in games case, you really want to make people engaged in the game. You really want to immerse themselves in there. And if you made the UI designer to make that happen, then their answer is to make everything very easy, so there won't be any problems or tediousness. Tediousness is the word that UI designers really want to evade at all costs.
Yeah.
But as you said, games are they're for the immersion. After you had a bad day at work battling against the UI with your computer, you really want to have this imaginary world where you can immerse yourself in. And the key to that immersion isn't the perfect UI as UI designers would think a perfect UI would be as a game. So yeah, this is just a UI designer's point of view. I can really see why that occurs. Why the games, when the game designers think, how do we make this more interesting, or people would really want to play this game, then the answer is sometimes the wrong one.
And indeed, the reason why I call it Band-Aid is because, you know, obviously there's a real problem in that people were having trouble finding this character. Maybe you get a quest in Skyrim and it tells you to find somebody named Tabata or something, and you have no idea where that person is, and that's the big problem. Or maybe you know that that person is in a specific city, and that's it. And like Kingdom Come Deliverance has a similar kind of problem in that you hear that you need to go find this person or that person, and you basically just know that the person is in a specific town, and that's it. And because that's a problem, you don't know who the character is. So now you have this option of putting just this Band-Aid there, where you just have the quest marker show that, yeah, it's this person. And you can just look at the map and go there. But the real solution, I think, which of course takes more work, is to make that person, like the quest text needs to say something special about the person, and the person needs to be somehow a little bit special. Like you could say that the person is a blacksmith, and now you already have something to go for. You can go to the town, and if the developers really want to like put emphasis on it, you can actually ask people, you know, where is this person or something. But if not, then you can just tell that, you know, it's the blacksmith, and now all you need to do is go around and look for the blacksmith. So when you find the blacksmith, you know, okay, that person is probably in there. And, you know, maybe they're not right now, maybe they've gone to eat, maybe it's lunchtime or something, but then you can just, you know, wait there or whatever. So that already is, to me, a much better gameplay decision. And especially since, like, I've seen so many articles that even in linear games, game designers are using colors and all sort of items of interest like that to, you know, push the player or give the player hints about where they should be headed. And even like old like platforming games on NES and Super Nintendo, and especially on like Nintendo 64, when 3D was new and very hard for a lot of people, developers were using like collectible items, coins and whatever, to sort of mark that, hey, you should probably go here. So I just think the same should be used for these open world games as well.
Yeah, and like you said, it's gonna take a lot of work, because I can really understand the mentality of using these markers or trying to evade these specific descriptions of people, because I really can see that when you make a game, you usually make the game first, then you start putting the quests in there, and some point in time, or you want to have it so that you can always go back to some quest and change. Okay, I don't want this character to be in this. They want to be able to change anything on the fly at the moment's notice, and that doesn't really allow to make special dialogue about a person who has black eyes and pointed ears or some very specific. But that's just a problem in the way games might be developed.
Yeah.
Maybe there should be more emphasis on doing the design process as far as you could before you start making the actual game.
Yeah, so it's really a problem with the design process or in the project management. But like if you look at games like Kingdom Come Deliverance, where everything is voice lined, so yeah, they probably needed to like at some point just decide that okay, these are the final like text lines that are going into the game, and now that they're going to be voice lined, they can't change anymore because we need to get the voices done. And yeah, I can see that that's a problem, but once again, it's just about, you need to take it into consideration when you're designing the world. So start by, making a bunch of interesting characters into the city, so that whenever somebody does a quest for that guy, then you can as easily as possible like show some defining traits from that character. And once again, it doesn't have to be too like specific. It doesn't need to be like that the person has a whatever hair color or anything like that. It can just be like their race, if it's an elf or a dwarf or something, or it can be like the job they're doing, as I mentioned, the blacksmith. Or like a butcher or anything.
Yeah, but there's also another aspect to these quest markers, because if you just look at them and think about where they are coming from, if you were a real person adventuring in an unknown land, you'd probably get a map, and you probably start making markings on your map.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what or it's definitely what the quest markers are trying to simulate, kind of, and streamline for the player, that you don't always have to be having physical maps, although sometimes it's very rewarding to have your own some kind of quest on your physical life, putting down notes about your game as you go on. But I really understand the mentality of having everything in your game and not having to jot down stuff on paper.
Yeah.
So it's really good to think how you can streamline stuff for a player. And quest markers, if done right, we're going back to Skyrim, because I really hate that when you open a book and then comes that sound that you got a quest, and I don't know how that quest came about. I tried to read it. There might be some hint about a place, but the book or the text in the book itself doesn't really highlight this, and it is special in that place.
Yeah.
At least I have some tiny memory that there was this some quest that came about from a book, and I really couldn't understand where the heck it took the quest from the book. And that's very jarring as a player if you don't understand. And it's like the game is deciding for you that you are now you discovered something interesting, and now you are interested to go look for that thing that was mentioned in the book. But if the text itself doesn't tell you that, then there's this disconnection with the quest becoming available and you understanding what the quest is even about.
Yeah.
So that's the caveat of using these kinds of markers. When you try to streamlining is nice, yes, but then you start making decisions for the player.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been, for a very long time, it's been years and years, I think, I've sometimes mentioned that I really wish that games just would allow you to open a map and put stuff in there as much as you like, and
Yeah.
maybe even some kind of writing feature, you can write stuff in there. Why is that so hard to make?
Yeah, I don't understand because, I mean, this kind of system has been in games before. If you look at Ultima Underworld, that's the first game that I know that uses that kind of system. You just open your map and you can click anywhere and you can just write stuff there and add your own markers.
Okay, and that's a game from 80s or 90s?
I can't remember, but yeah, it's at least around 30 years old game.
Yeah.
So it's been a very long time, and that's specifically why I don't understand why don't like games give you that opportunity. Like even Kingdom Come Deliverance only allows you to place one like map marker at a time, and then you can just take that out or put another one in, and that's your only one map marker. And of course it does like save some locations of basically interesting locations as markers there automatically, but like why can't you like put your own in there? And
especially nowadays when everyone has the consoles and PCs are powerful enough to contain that sort of information, custom information you put in your game.
And like I can sort of understand from the point that maybe they were also considering like console players, so it's kind of hard to maybe write something on a like a joystick, well, on a normal controller. But even in that case, it would be nice if you could just put a marker there, and it doesn't have to like you don't have to necessarily add any text. You can just place a marker, and it's your own special marker.
Yeah, somehow this reminds me of Dark Souls. That's one aspect of the game, is that players can put in some their own notes for other players to discover. It's some kind of symbol, you can slap it in somewhere and then write something, and it's made so that you have kind of a list of words. You don't get to write anything you want. You get this list of words that the developers have put in there, and then they choose from the list to make some kind of message to other players. And that's for Dark Souls is also on consoles and PC as well. So there are workarounds for that as well.
Yeah, so you could use something like that, but I mean, like in a sense, I want to like believe in the developers in that they must have at least, you know, tested it out or tried it out or something, and decided that, you know, or they have some sort of like test results that show that people don't like using those markers all that much. I don't really know, because I mean, at least Breath of the Wild, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, in that game you could also put all sort of markers in, and I think, and there are also markers that get automatically added there, especially if you find like Korok seeds. But I don't think it was in any way, you know, a bad addition to the game.
I think that's kind of the optimal way to implement this sort of allowing the player to put something on the map.
Yeah.
By providing a group or bunch of different symbols that you can then decide what each symbol represents to you, and then you can just use them as much as you want.
Yeah.
And it really worked. We have a beautiful array of locations marked down in the Breath of the Wild's map.
Yeah.
And they all, each of all those markers, they mean something to us, because we specifically put them there.
And I mean, I can understand, like, if you test how people use that, I can see that small problem that, you know, at first you're like, okay, I'm gonna put, maybe I found a boss or a big monster or something, I'm gonna put a skull there. And next time you find something else and you don't remember what you used and you put a skull there as well. So now they don't mean the same thing. But like, really, who cares? Is it really that important that they didn't use the same marker? Because, I mean, at least it means something to you. Maybe you go back there someday and you were like, oh, I used to use these skulls for this kind of things, and now I'm using them for different kind of things, and I don't think that's really a bad thing.
Yeah, you can always change that.
Yeah. And just because you're sort of using it wrong, I don't really see a problem with that. But I can see some UI designer being very angry about people not using it correctly and being like, yo, we can add this to the game because people are going to use it wrong.
We've been bashing the quest markers quite a lot, but I happened to mention the Crazy Taxi game, and that's an example of a game where the quest marker, or in this case, an arrow pointing at the direction, is quite essential to the game, and that's not bad thing because it's an arcade type game where you really need to get fast to the next location. One would argue you could do something different with that, but that's just, I think that's an example where there are games that it's not bad thing to have a quest marker.
Yeah.
When it's a game not about the world building and more about getting things done as fast as possible.
Yeah.
If the point of the game is progression as fast as possible, then I understand really when the quest marker could have a place, or these game developers handmade, or they put the quest marker kind of thing to guide the player.
I mean, if you look at any like car racing games, any car games, it's always about the track, the one track that you're driving, and there are sort of arrows pointing that, okay, you're going to have to turn right, you're going to have to turn left now. So it definitely fits in that kind of like scenario, but that's all the more reason why I don't think it really fits any sort of games where the point of the game is to go on an adventure.
Yeah.
Because once again, it just means that you're not there to experience the wonderful world of Azeroth. Instead, you're just, you want to go to the place where you can get the quest done as quickly as possible and come back as quickly as possible. And that's just sad to me, because, I mean, some people like that, and yeah, of course, I enjoyed that as well, in a sense, but it's not the point of the game. And
that's kind of a nice or interesting thought, that adding a quest marker like that, it kind of changes the genre of the game. It makes it kind of a racing game or task game to you.
Because, I mean, one of the great things that World of Warcraft originally did was that it streamlined like these quests. Because before that, a lot of games that had, or MMOs that had any sort of quests, it was usually like the quests were really, really rare, or at least on the games that I played. Like there was maybe only like a handful of quests for the whole game, and if somebody else got to do that quest, then you missed it until some item respawns again during the next respawn cycle or something like that. So yeah, World of Warcraft did really well in giving you a lot of quests, but it was, to me, it was like a really good combination, like a compromise of streamlining things, but at the same time letting you go out on an adventure, instead of in those other games, if you managed to do one quest, then you felt really good because it was really, really rare that happened, because there were so few quests and they were other people were competing you for those quests and so on. So in World of Warcraft you had a lot of quests and nobody was, or well, yeah, there was some competition, but still you could probably do a lot of them. But the modern version of World of Warcraft has gone way too far to the other direction, where it's just like a to-do list, and you don't care about the world. So you're basically just doing that in a very expensive game. And I just don't think that's really as satisfying as, also having the sense of adventure. Or you could even say that it's just like playing some mobile game where you're just repeating tasks over and over again.
So I'm really wondering what has caused this to happen. Is it just kind of when they keep adding stuff, they lost sight of the original vision and start adding stuff in and really not looking at the big picture of how it feels like, or was it on purpose? Have they specifically targeted towards this task list, glorified task list? And if so, does that mean that's where the most of the money can be made, making games feel like task lists? Is that really the money-making machine?
Yeah. Because to me it really feels like, well, I really like talking a lot about World of Warcraft because to me it's a perfect example of this game that the developers, they've kept improving it for, I don't know, almost 20 years now. They just improved it, and the end result is that it's worse than it was in the start. And that feels really strange from like a developer standpoint. How can you improve something and then make it worse in the end? And it's just like, okay, so as I mentioned, I used those like mods myself back when World of Warcraft didn't show you where to go automatically. I myself used those mods that, when you open the map, it would show you where to go. So even I, as a player, thought that, that's an improvement back in the game. And I didn't understand until much later that, what it was taking away from me. Because I don't really remember how long I played World of Warcraft for, but something like, I guess it was closer to 10 years. I think I was still around when the 10-year anniversary happened. One thing I really noticed at some point was that I have a lot of memories from like my earlier characters that I, leveled. Even if I only leveled them to like level 20 or something, when level 60 was the maximum level. But my later characters that I leveled to, I think around 70 or 80, I don't remember almost anything about that whole thing. Almost nothing. I mean, that's 80 levels of character leveling. It must have taken months for me, definitely. And I don't remember anything what happened between there. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And of course you can say that, when you start something, then of course you remember the first things. But for these later characters, I was playing like, this was at the time of Cataclysm, when they changed the entire world and they changed all the quests and everything. But at the same time, the game became more like
amusement park.
Yeah, at that time, the game became more like an amusement park ride. So you weren't really thinking about anything. You were just, okay, go there, and you just follow the quest marker, and something happens, and somebody flies you to some ship, and it's epic. But you don't really remember anything about it because you're just in there for the ride, and that's it.
This just proves that quest markers are just part of the this bigger problem that's become prevalent in the AAA game scene, where they really want to get you invested in the game somehow, and with as cheap tactics as possible. And everyone understands that if you're gonna make vanilla Warcraft style game, you'd have to work really hard to make it work. It's a lot of work, effort, and working hours put in to make people invested and want to wander around without knowing where to go, only by showing it in the world with some hints or with characters talking about those places where to go. Instead, you get this way easier and way more, this system that you can replicate infinitely. And that's the task list system.
Yeah.
And the immersion and getting players hooked. The task list needs to have a lot of things to do. You always have to have this feeling that there's still stuff left to do in the game. I have to go back. That's the tactic they are using, these task lists.
Yeah.
And these two design philosophies, they do the same thing, but one is way less expensive to make than the other. And well, now we came up with the answer why quest markers are stupid and used wrong, and they're band-aid. They are mostly band-aid in many games, but in some more recent games, I think they are calculated decisions to make this task list system.
And I kind of think that, even in the original World of Warcraft, there was always something to do. But I almost feel like they looked at some charts or some statistics that showed that, players were sort of starting out, and if they felt lost during the first X amount of minutes, then maybe they stopped playing or something like that. And they had to make that experience much more linear and then keep it linear so that you level your character as far as possible. And now that you've made it all that way, all that far, then it means that, you feel like at that point you've invested so much time into your character that you no longer want to let go. You're already at level 70 or whatever. So you want to make it to the end, and that's all sort of keeps the player retention.
Yeah, the fancy word for this is the sunk cost fallacy, isn't it? It's either time or money, and preferably both for modern games.
Yeah.
And that's the method modern game makers or the AAA game makers want to make players hooked into their games with this task list system that makes you feel like you invested so much time in it that it would be waste of money and waste of your time to stop playing it. And I'm starting to think, and many other, like the anime series or manga series that just keep going and going. There's hundreds of issues of the same manga. That's the same tactic in there too. If you hooked a person with the TV series just enough, that's why they really put a lot of effort in the first season or so that people get hooked, and preferably the first 1 or 2 episodes need to be very hooking. They need to grab you, and then when they get to some kind of 5th season, that's quite a lot of hours if you think about some 45-minute episodes in 5 seasons. That's already you're in the sunk cost fallacy territory, very deep in there. And then you can just keep making this series to the end of the world, and there will be some people they can't let go because of the feeling that if you now let go, you are just you haven't gotten to the end of the story. And that's very brutal when you think about it.
Yeah. And
well, it's only a TV series, it's fantasy, these are stories. One would say it's not about you getting food next day. This is a really first world problem, but it's very psychological problem that might have played some part in people having mental issues also, or at least these tactics are exploiting this specific type of mental wiring some people have.
You could even say that they're feeding into some basic human need. But
and it's very real for people who don't have to worry about the food anymore. We have to worry about these mental or these very superficial things. But it's very real for people having these. And I watched Naruto when it was very popular. I got to episode 122, I think, and then I'm the type of person who you can't keep hooked too long, and I was just I don't want to watch this anymore. And there are a lot of people who felt the need to keep watching even for more.
Yeah, because
but I wasn't that type of person.
Yeah, because some people really want to know how it ends, and even in my case, because I've mentioned sometimes that games should be a toy box, that if you start something, you shouldn't feel the absolute need to finish that game or TV series or whatever. But at the same time, like on our blog, I've had 2 games like hanging in the like now playing section for a long time, because those are games that I really want to finish at some point, and just I haven't had time to keep continuing them. I'm like almost 500 hours into Kingdom Come Deliverance. I've just been playing and enjoying that, even though it's a single player game. So, but there's just a lot to see there and experience there, and I've had fun with it. Of course, I can every now and then. Okay, once again, this is a tangent, but I every now and then I keep. I get like this sense of nostalgia about like the first time I played the game, like the first 20 or so hours, like this really nice feeling of mysteriousness I had while playing that game. And of course, I don't have that anymore, so that's kind of sad. But of course, if you played something for so long, then it's understandable, because at this point I know pretty much the entire map inside out. And
yeah, but that's inevitable in any games. That's why we want to buy new game and start playing that, because it's nice when the game ends. Then you know you can start a new game, and maybe that game gives you that same sense of mystery and discovery.
Yeah.
You can only discover a game once, unless you forget about it completely and start playing it again.
Exactly.
40 years later.
I remember back when I started playing Ultima Underworld, there was one guy on a specific GameFAQs forum that mentioned that he was very envious of me being able to experience the game for the first time. And I can really understand that, because if it's a great game and if it's really something that can suck you into the game and its world, then the first time is always something special that you can never get back. Except, well, maybe the nice feelings of nostalgia. But speaking of Kingdom Come Deliverance, in that game, if you play the hardcore mode, there's some things that the game does nicely regarding this problem. It still has the band-aid of showing exactly where to go on the map, but at the same time, what it does is that it no longer shows you on the map. So, okay, you can see the map, you can see where you need to go, but you don't see where you are. You need to actually look at the world and understand that, okay, there's a city there, and looking around, this looks like that city that I can see on the map, so maybe I'm in that city, so I'm probably in the right direction. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, it does have the compass that even Skyrim has, but the compass no longer shows you. It does have those like major and minor lines that show you that, okay, I'm looking at some major direction, but I don't know if it's north or south or east or west. I just know that I'm looking at some major direction. And in that sense, it does add a little bit to the adventure. That you need to really look at the world and you need to understand the world.
But that's only when you played the game once already.
You can start the game on that hardcore mode, But of course, like
That's a really. I really wish UI stuff wouldn't be some hardcore or behind the difficulty of the game.
Yeah.
It should be its separate thing where you can go to the settings and decide, okay, I really want to find my way on my own. Then I can toggle off some of the aiding
yeah.
arrows and stuff.
Hmm.
And the hard mode or the difficulty mode would be its separate thing
Yeah.
you choose.
One other thing I liked about the hardcore mode is that when you start the game, you get to choose from some negative perks for your character. So these are like, perks are usually things that are positive for your character, or at least something that makes your character special. But these are all negative ones. And one of them is like, was it like insomnia or something? Well, basically sleepwalking. So your character has a chance that when you go to sleep, he sleepwalk somewhere and he wakes up somewhere else. And especially if you don't know the map really, really well, you go to sleep and you wake up and you have no idea where you are. And once again, the compass doesn't show you any major directions, so you have no idea what direction to go. And it may be night and whatever, and you're completely lost. So I thought that was really nice.
So if they had all the aids, all the markers, and you know where you are, then it would be more of just a tedious annoyance, that sleepwalking feature.
Yeah.
But when there's this aspect that you have to really pay attention to the map and your surroundings, then it becomes more of a adventure.
Yeah.
Something that it still might be annoying, but at least you as a player are in control, or it randomly whisks you into a situation that you weren't expecting.
Yeah. And like that's one other thing that I really wanted to mention, that here in Finland, every man is duty bound to go through at least half a year of army service. And back when I was doing my service, we on one evening, one of the sergeants came to our room, and he just sat on a table that was at the end of the room, and he started talking about all sort of army things, and it was really really encouraging about all the things that he talked about. I don't remember much about it, but the one thing that I always will remember is that he mentioned that the best memories you have in life are always from those shittiest situations. And that's especially true in games. Like you really shouldn't try to keep yourself away from any problems you may have in games or any dangerous situations, because all the best memories you always have are when something goes wrong. Like in this case, when you go to sleep, you wake up somewhere, you have no idea where you are. It becomes a whole story on your own without some developer writing it for you. It becomes your story about how you made it out, or maybe you didn't, maybe you died, whatever happened.
Yeah, it's really easy to have this idea in your head that games are entertainment. And what entertainment is, it's always fun and games. It's being happy and having some fun times. But you really need to understand that in order to feel happy or happiness, you really need to also feel the sadness, so you have something to compare it to. And well, success is a very big part of any game. If you are failing on something, on some quest or some jump on the platforming section, and then you finally succeed because of effort you put into it, that's a way more powerful positive feeling than doing some tasks just like that without any trouble. You hadn't felt any trouble for that success to happen.
Yeah, and like that's one of the like biggest problems. I think I'd like to imagine one of the biggest problems in game design is that, of course, if you make things too hard, then everybody's just going to be frustrated. Like I keep hating like almost every like 2D fighting game because there's always this one last boss there in the game and it's always way too hard. Like you have to do like fight against 8 normal characters and you beat them without taking any damage, and then you meet this one boss character who has all the moves in the game and steals life force out of you if you're close, and if you're far away shoots you with something. And then you just fight that for 2 hours, and even when you do win them you got some cutscene that shows you that you actually still lost. And it's like I hate that kind of thing. But like if you balance it out really well, it's important to have like these moments of success, but also those moments of, you know, despair and confusion and, you know, not knowing what to do or where to go or failing and so on. And you can even see this in like movie formulas, and especially in Japanese manga. I think it has become really formulaic in that, you know, main characters, they don't always win. There has to be some ratio, like 2 wins and 1 loss, and then 2 wins and 1 loss, so that those wins actually feel like something, that there's this sense of danger. Or even in some series, I mean, I guess a big reason why Game of Thrones is so popular, of course, is because you don't know who's going to survive. So there's always this sense of dread all the time. You know, whenever you fall in love with some character, you're sort of like, oh no, they're gonna die at some point, surely. And I guess there's this Chinese folktale, The Romance of Three Kingdoms, as well, which is sort of the same thing in that I haven't read the story myself, but I understood that really most of the characters die, especially since the story just spans so many generations that, you know, at some points they have to die because it's just so long. And yeah, that's, you know, frustration is a big part of gameplay experience, and if you just, you know, streamline it too much, then it sort of takes all the meaning away. And like I mentioned multiple times now, I was the person who decided to install that, you know, mod into World of Warcraft that showed me exactly where to go, because, you know, I thought for myself, and I'm sure that a lot of people who may listen or hear this may still think that, yeah, but I like having those quest markers, I like having to see where to go exactly, I don't have the time or whatever to, you know, go looking around for it. But like it still, like now all these years after experiencing that, I can really understand how much you lose if you just follow that arrow and you don't look at the world. And even in Kingdom Come Deliverance, you know, it feels like, you know, sure, I enjoyed the mysteriousness of the first like 20 or so hours very much, but at the same time it almost feels like I rediscovered the game after I started the hardcore run, because now, even though I know most of the world, I'm just really enjoying looking at the world and walking around places and exploring it by myself.
So there's a big difference there, how you use the quest markers. If it starts turning gears in a player's head, then you've done a good implementation of those markers, if you put them in. Because, yeah, this is just because people are inclined to look at games or any development as a linear or some kind of hockey stick. This development of we're in the zero now and then we go up and everything goes better with time when we discover new things or design new things for the, in this case, for the gaming. But it's not always that the case.
Yeah.
If you try to look at the gaming scene now, well, it really depends on what part of the gaming scene you look at, but I always go back to the AAA games like EA's, FIFA, Madden. Ubisoft has all these clone games that have different names, but they are essentially the same game type. This big map with lots of millions of markers showing you have stuff to do here, and they are all going to this tactic, like, because of the things we mentioned earlier about it's cheaper to make and it's a cheaper way to get player hooked.
Yeah.
But the downside of that is it's not a long-term solution. It's for this short term. You may hook people with, or a lot of people with that tactic, but will they be remembering those games with fond memories 20 years from now? Will they have these memories of, oh, I succeeded here, or oh, I had trouble here and then I triumphed in the end?
Probably not.
But that's we call fluff. That
Yeah.
doesn't really, you consume it, but it really doesn't give you anything other than the quick satisfaction, but it doesn't last in you in the future.
I guess that's a good comparison in that you're not playing a game, you're just consuming the game.
Whatever we talk about, it always comes to this modern gaming rant, and it's just because that's the fact. Anything we want to discuss about is usually something that's troublesome, and maybe we'll find new topics, and then when we start making a video about it, then we rediscover, oh, this is a modern gaming
Problem, yeah.
Everything comes back to the same source all the time.
Once again, going back to Crazy Taxi, I think that in the modern gaming, because, gaming has existed for quite long, for long enough time now that there are, a lot of different kind of tools for developers to use. And that means that, you can very easily, take that arrow that you saw in Crazy Taxi and think, this would actually fix the problem that we have with our massive RPG game. And yeah, it's the wrong tool there, but it is a tool, and that's sort of the problem in that we have so many solutions and people are using them in wrong scenarios. And indeed, like if you're a game developer, I think it's very important to know that indeed, as we mentioned, quest markers are something that make your game more like streamlined, and it makes it sort of a racing game. And if you are making a racing game, then yeah, you should use these sort of quest markers or waypoints or whatever. But if you're not, if you want to add the sense of adventure, then it would be really important to, not have there, and instead focus on actually fixing the problem, which is like designing the world better and making, that there are, for example, roads that you can walk, and most of the places where you need to go are, along those roads. And they are like colorfully marked, and people are distinct from each other so that you can find them instead of just looking for the quest markers. And of course, it's some people might argue that, okay, in games like Skyrim and Kingdom Come Deliverance, where you're trying to be as realistic as possible, it may be hard to make, people look distinct from each other so that you can recognize them from far away or whatever. But even in those cases, I do think that it's very much possible. Like in Kingdom Come, there's a lot of very colorful, but also at the same time realistic clothing that these people had. And you can use various other effects, like if somebody's bald, then that's easily something to recognize them from. And like it really didn't take me all that long, I think, in Kingdom Come Deliverance to learn many of the characters and actually recognize them from pretty far away, even though there are a lot of people who wear similar clothes. And also it was very, there was this one scenario where I was playing against one guy. There's in the game you can play this like a dice game. I think it was called Farkle. So I was playing against one guy, and I noticed that he had some special dice that he was playing with. And the only way to get those dice from that character is, of course, you'd have to steal them from him. You know, you have to sneak up and grab them from his pockets. And it's not like a super special character. It's just somebody in the city or town who has like he has a little bit more money than other people, and he has those special dice. And so it's not a part of a quest or anything. So this guy, not once in the game, there's no like quest marker that tells you where he's going. And I played against him, and I was like, okay, I'm going to sit here and maybe wait that, you know, he stands up and goes somewhere so that I can sneak up behind him and I can steal the dice. And I think I waited and for a while, and then I noticed, oh, the guy's gone. And then I started just, you know, running around and running around my horse, and eventually I recognized him because he had these like pants that I had paid attention to. It was like the left sleeve of his pants was like black, and it had these like fancy icons on it. And the other side, I think it was gray or sort of like silverish, so it shines a little bit. And I went and I was, is that him? Oh, it is. Nice. Okay, so then I could go around and follow him for a while and steal the dice from him. And once again, that was an adventure that I remember. That was my own story experience from that game. Nobody wrote that in the game, and it was because I noticed something special about that character.
When we are talking about realism, and when game developers want to make a realistic looking game, that's one thing we could be talking about at some video about this photorealism. And why there's such a drive to make everything photorealistic in games, when you have a whole medium that you could do anything, literally anything with your game. But going back to this realistic style, it's most of the artists, when they are told to make something realistic, they get this very narrow small box in their head that you can't stray away from that in any way you, or in any means. Don't stray away from that realistic box, and that almost always means that you just make the typical 8 heads tall person with very generic or the ideal body type, and then put it in the game. When if you look at real people, they are, well, I don't know, there are smaller people, there are taller people, even in the adults. There are women who are very tall, there are men who are very small, and vice versa. There are many types of bodies already in the world, in the realistic world, and that's something that's really missing from games like that, because, and I understand, artists really like to make things beautiful. They want to make things or draw anything with their ideal body type, whatever it happens to be to each artist. And they really struggle to get outside of that box to make something different with that body type, changing the proportions and the hair types and face shapes and everything. Because realistic doesn't mean you can't make a box shaped head or oval shaped head. You just have to understand what a realistic box shaped head looks like. And I think that's the biggest problem when you realistic means homogenized in some weird way, when that's not the case at all. But it's also the effort part too, because it's easier to make one body and then copy paste that and change some clothing.
Yeah.
But even the clothing, as you already used pretty brilliant example, even if you can't make different body types, then you can make different clothing, or some anime characters are very, very, very not famous, but it's very apparent in anime and manga characters that they have this one very recognizable part of them. If there's a group of girls, then one has glasses, the single one has glasses, and someone has the small person. They have perfected this formula of making a bunch of characters that are distinct, just with one item in their head or mouth or somewhere.
Yeah, like bunch of characters that all have the same face, but then they have different hairstyles and hair colors and everything.
But you can make it in a realistic manner too, because we in real life people recognize others from their walking style, from how they carry themselves.
Yeah.
And that's how you imitate other people. You look at how they carry themselves, and that's how you can then try to imitate them. And if you imitate them perfectly, then you kind of taken in what that real life person is like.
Yeah, that actually reminded me that back before high school, or like in the junior high school, I remember that I could, a lot of times when I was sitting by a classroom waiting for the class to start, and maybe I was reading some book or drawing some doodles or whatever, I could recognize my best friend just with like the
from the side of your
eye, from the side of my eye
vision.
Yeah, from the side of my vision, just from his walking style. So yeah, that's something that isn't all that like, because as you mentioned, it's really troublesome. Of course, a lot of game developers like to make this one body type or one body rig so that all the clothes can then fit that same body type and there's no problem. It's easier. But like at the same time, you could just, change the walking style or walking speed or whatever, and that would already, help a lot with recognizing characters from each other.
Yeah. Actually, one other thought that came to my mind is that, well, games are audio-visual experiences. There's this audio part too, but when you think about the game design part, they always, well, if they are making of videos or anything, then it's very obvious that there's always art or the concept art of the stuff. But how many times have you seen or heard some sound concepting? Because sound is very big part of how we recognize people. Because one of my colleagues at my work, I always know where he's going, because he walks very specifically, first of all, but then he has this keychain around his neck, and that clinks and clanks when he walks around, and I can hear behind me he's coming now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, even at my work, there was a guy who had these like plastic slippers on him, and you could always hear when he was, walking on the corridor, and you knew, oh, okay, he's coming here.
Slap, slap,
yeah.
slap, slap. But yeah, that's one aspect. Many games have very astounding sound designs and very beautiful music.
And very satisfying sound effects with combat and
sound
stuff.
effects, but they forget that people, you could brand a person kind of with some kind of sound effect, or they might have some theme music playing along with them or something like that. You could use sound to make people recognizable as well. Not only the talking sound, but everything. Because I know voice acting or getting voiced lines in your game, that's very daunting task. That's a whole other art. But if you want to evade doing any voice acting on your game and just use text, but you still have the voice or sound effects to play with. You could put some sound effects or some grunts or different sounds for those characters.
Yeah. Or just have them whistling around while they're walking or whatever. There's a lot of potential there. And yeah, really, I don't remember seeing that used all that much. Maybe in horror games, I guess, like in, well, Metroid Dread, of course, when there's Emmy around the robot, then you sort of hear the clanks and so on, and the beeps and whatever. So I guess horror uses that, but it could be used outside of horror games just to make all those characters recognizable.
This is all part of the quest marker. What's the fix for quest markers? And making people recognizable, and as well as the places recognizable. If they are all the gray corridors in your game, then there's a high chance the player would never connect the different places in the game to what it's supposed to be. It's very important to have this environmental design also. That makes it. And well, you praised World of Warcraft, and I understood that game also has very distinct places, at least the vanilla part.
Yeah.
But that's a fantasy game, and when you go to the realistic style, there's still, because people navigate around cities all the time, and how do they navigate them?
Yeah.
Well, nowadays they have phones with maps all the times, but if you forget about that, then you use points of interest. You use the names of the streets and the looks of the houses and what kinds of shops are there.
Yeah.
We use those all the time, and that's realistic. You can't get any more realistic than that, going into the streets and take note of how you manage to go around in the city without getting lost in there.
And with game, as you mentioned, with like realism and real life, but of course, realism in games, of course, it's an illusion. It's not about the game being real, it's about the game feeling real. So you can get away with a lot of things. For example, the Kingdom Come Deliverance feels very much like a real world. It feels very realistic, but at the same time, like if you have a horse, you can just whistle for it and it just teleports behind your back. And you never have to feed your horse. You don't have to feed your dog. You can just leave it somewhere. And
you don't have to go to the toilet every couple of times a day.
Yeah, so that's just the illusion of realism. It's just there's enough things that it feels real, and that's all that you need to like manage. So you can get away with a lot of things. For example, if you want that there's like also sort of points of interest, like there's a road and the points of interest are hidden all around the forest, then you can have these like small things that maybe there's footprints, and you can add little bit of some flair to those footprints to make them stand out more than actual footprints would in real life. Or maybe there's like somebody has grabbed a branch and stuck it on the ground, and you can make that branch be like pretty bright. It doesn't need to like shine with a huge glow on it like in modern World of Warcraft. All it needs to be is a little different color that you notice from all this other forest, which is very like darkish brown and darkish green. And that's instantly, I mean, that's actually something that Kingdom Come uses. There are some like hunting grounds, and those are usually marked by these branches on the ground, and they are special colored, so you're like, oh, what is that? And you start following it, and you notice, oh, there's another one, and you follow it, and eventually you find yourself on a hunting ground. So also that kind of effects you can use and still make the world feel very real. And I guess, like, you can, as I mentioned, you can get away with a lot of things like that, because in Kingdom Come, there's also one quest where you're trying to find a horse that's run away. And how you do it is you basically come to this crossroads and you see that, oh, there's fresh poop on the ground, and it's come from a horse. And you start to follow it, and mysteriously this horse has managed to drop down a pile of poop like every 10 meters or so for like several kilometers. So he's really pooped a lot there, and that's obviously not realistic at all, but you can get away with that because it's a game.
But they made it in a realistic way. It's very realistic, a horse to poop, but if you made some, let's say, glowing phosphorus footprints, that's not very realistic. It doesn't fit with the game. How do you have how did the horse get phosphorus in their feet?
Yeah.
So that's the part what's realistic about this scenario. You always have to think about what's realistic for this game, or in this instance of a game even.
And there's some other cases in the game where you're like following some people, and what they've done is that, you know, you can see that they've dropped a shirt and pants somewhere, and you're like, okay, they've dropped their shirt and pants, so this must be the right way. And you go and they've dropped a bunch of apples, okay, and then they've dropped a whole barrel. You're like, okay, they were carrying this around, okay, and you go forward, and okay, there's another pair of shirt and pants there, and then there's a third pair of shirt and pants there. So why is this guy carrying around so many pairs of shirts and pants? I don't know, but clearly I'm going the right direction because they've dropped this. And even in that, you know, it's unrealistic, but it does its job. And sure, they could have put a little bit more effort in that maybe they had to drop some other things at the time, but it works.
That's kind of one example of a good quest marker. That's kind of a form of quest marker, having this breadcrumbs in the road, but with pants and shirts. You can always make, or using the argument that this game is supposed to be realistic, it doesn't prevent you from making a very playable game with very explorable world without all these man-made or
clearly artificial
effects.
things. And the same thing with realism is that, as we mentioned, like, just because you want to make the characters distinct from each other, it doesn't mean that you have to go the anime route. You don't have to take your medieval fantasy game based on the year 1400 in Bohemia, center of the Europe, and then have every character have different hair color. Somebody's green and somebody's blue. You don't need to do that. Of course, you can. There's a lot of ways to make the thing realistic and still have the characters be different. And even you can, like Kingdom Come reuses a lot of the characters' faces. So once you've met all the NPCs in the world, you'll start to see that, okay, these faces really
repeat.
They start to repeat a lot. But even so, you can use clothing and, of course, various hairstyles and other things to really separate those characters from each other still, and still be very realistic. So it's just a matter of putting, you know, the work in the right things, and not just being like, you know, a bit too lazy about it and just, you know, making that system where you just input coordinates and then the game automatically just says, go here, and go here.
Yeah, but on the other hand, if you are tied or if you don't have time to make everything perfect, then I can, of course, you really need to put the effort in where it's important to put your time in. And if using the band-aid that's called these quest markers, then if that's a smaller
evil.
Yeah, smaller evil, you can make your game better overall because you put that time into the game mechanics. Because always it's in the games, the most important part is the gaming experience, and if you can't control your character and it doesn't feel natural or all these other elements are wrong, then it doesn't matter if you have quest markers there or not. If you can't even enjoy the game at its core.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point this out, that don't also focus too much on this one single thing and making it bad for the player if there's 90% of the game still to be done. Also.
Yeah.
But still it's important to understand what is quest marker's purpose in your game.
Yeah, what's the purpose and what are the repercussions for using it? And it is that it streamlines the game. It takes away from the adventure. And if you're fine with that sacrifice and you're not trying to make the game an adventure, then okay, that's fine. But if you are specifically trying to make the game an adventure, then definitely do not use quest markers in that sense, I think. Because that's the trade-off.
Yeah, I can really see that some people are just... You've seen it in other games, and then you start making a game and the quest markers are just part of this genre. And that's very not very beneficial.
It's kind of like you see a blacksmith, or you can see somebody hammer a nail in, and you see, oh, that looks very easy, and you take the hammer and you don't really know what to use the hammer for, and you use it wrongly to, break something. So it's a tool, and a lot of people are seeing it, and they're using it
without thinking why it's there, or should it be in your game.
Yeah. And that goes for a lot of other game designs and game design tools and other things. But this is one that I have like a personal vendetta against, I guess, because I, for the last 10 years, I've really come to enjoy or appreciate the adventure part, and this specifically takes away from the adventure, and that's why I don't like it.
Have we exhausted the topic?
I guess so.
Yeah.
That's just our thoughts about the subject. If you have any thoughts on it yourself, feel free to leave a comment. But other than that, we've been Geralf and Vajandil of the Owl Basket team. We'll see you on the next video.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.